Hi, folks. Basically, I'm putting together a real quick video because I wanted to put this out there for another YouTuber named DevJB and also a couple of other people that had questions for me. And I just wanted to do this really quick. Like back in May, in the beginning of May, when all winter long, I was basically talking to Forrest like I always did every year. It was nothing new. I was telling him our solution. He knew since December of 2019 that I was back teamed up with Sam again. And he also knew that in the spring of 2020, I was going to be heading out to location for my current solve, which he knew in detail to solve because I had sent him various emails throughout the year. And he also, of course, knows where Sam was looking. So basically, in the beginning of May, I sent an email to my partner, and it had this image on there. And then it was an email that explained all of these locations, the X down here, and these other places. And I also talked about Five Springs and Crystal Creek. So anyway, I sent blind carbon copy to Forrest Fenn that email that I sent to my partner with this image and map of locations. Now, that was when Forrest, for some strange reason, sent me this long paragraph that basically told me that he didn't want me to email him anymore. And he hoped that I understand. It became a burden, and I hope you understand. He repeated himself. I've shown a couple people that email. I think I even put it in one of my videos. But it was very strange that that happened. In that email, I was telling my partner that he can go either the week before or the week after June 6th. And I said, but let's do something different this time. Don't tell me the exact day you're going. I said, maybe you could surprise me and do it on June 6th, which is my 39th wedding anniversary. And like I said, I blind carbon copied Forrest that email. Forrest replied back to me, basically telling me not to email him. So shortly after that happened, Forrest then comes out with the toe to toe contest on Dow's website. And toe to toe usually means there's some kind of a race, like there's multiple people heading to the same spot. So basically, I believe that Forrest knew, and I know for sure now that there were at least two other groups that were headed to the same area, not exactly the same locations, but they were heading to the wheel. And I know that Forrest knew that because two of those other people have told me that they let Forrest know in 2019 that they were going back in the spring. So Forrest knew that two other people, at least, probably more, were going in the spring, and he knew that I was going on June 6th. And I believe he wanted to cut communications with everybody because if one of us found it, he didn't want anything to happen. So rightfully so. That's the only way that I can explain this. So anyway, the part that I want to tell Deb JB is this is the map I sent them, and basically this is the arrow that I formed using the clues in the poem for that solve. And our main location was right here by this tree. And I'll show you really quickly how we arrived. These other locations were like secondary in case that the poem was talking about heading in this direction. This green line is a fence, a cattle fence that goes across there. When you're standing at the wheel, you can't even see this fence because this is a hill dipping down. So these other spots were kind of locations off those same vectors, which is where Sam's solve was. So I flipped it around because I thought Sam was wrong. And I said, no, I believe it's here. This is the primary spot we should look at. So the way I came up with that is if we look in the medicine wheel here, basically, when you're reading the poem and he's got you standing at the wheel, we're oriented north. When you enter the wheel, you have to go counterclockwise. I mean, you have to go clockwise or sunwise because there's a sign right here that tells you, it says, please walk left. So you walk around this way. You're following the sun. Okay. And these are all the cairns and markers they have described in the documentation that's on site. A points to Aldebaran, which is the eye of Taurus. B points to Rigel, which is Orion's toe, his foot. C points to Sirius, which is one of Orion's hunting dogs. Okay, this is the great dog. He's in the lure, he's chasing a hare across the river. Okay. D is Famahat, the southern fish, which is right below Aquarius, which is the water bearer. And E is the sunrise. So on the solstice, if you stand here and look across the center, you'd see the sunrise. And if you stand in this circle and you look across the center, you would see the sunset up here in this direction on the day of the solstice. So the lines that I had, just very briefly in the poem, were sort of like this, and I'm not going to get totally accurate with him. But when he has you coming in here, he says, "From there, it's no place further meek." So we're at Taurus, right? The end is ever drawing nigh. That's Orion drawing his bow. So we're going to draw that a line here, right? Let's just do that right there. Let's save that line, okay? And then he says, "There will be no paddle up your creek." And if you look, when you're sitting here and you look, the Sirius marker is actually not in the circle. It's off here. If you look on the chart that's available on site, this circle is where you would stand to watch the sunset. So Sirius is kind of over here. So there's no paddle up your creek, right? That's a reference to the river that one of Orion's dogs is chasing down. And Orion's toe, incidentally, Rigel, is dipping into that river. Okay, if you read the mythology and the lore about it, right? So he said, "There'll be no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads and water high." Okay, now water high would be Famahat, and again Aquarius. Okay, but he's saying heavy loads and water high. So, but he's saying also the end is ever drawing nigh. If you read end instead of saying the word end, say END or E ampersand D, kind of like peanut butter and jelly. My theory was that he's telling us to stand at E and look towards D. In other words, the END is ever drawing nigh. So we'll go back in there and we'll draw another vector from here to here. Okay. And basically, when you get him in the center, it crosses in this gully right. This isn't totally accurate, but it would be right basically at this tree. Now you get a third line that points there too. If you go down to the bench, okay, which is the overlook where Francis Brown and well, on the bench it says Charles Brady, and then it says Francis Brown, and then it says Haman Wise. Those are the three tribal elders that led the coalition for the wheel, which is based out of Taos, New Mexico. And the leader of that was Francis Brown. So the reason why the coalition formed is because they consider Medicine Mountain, which let me get rid of this for a second. Medicine Mountain Peak is here, is their spiritual origin. That's why they made the wheel over here. So this was Mahoma Brown. So when you're below the Mahoma Brown, you're down here in that basin. Okay, it's pretty simple and straightforward. This overlook, when you park at the wheel down here and you walk your way up, they got all kinds of signs along the way, but this is where they have markers and a fence over here and the benches. And this is where you overlook. And they're talking about the ancient trail that the natives used to come up. It was a travois trail. In other words, a trail that will be made by an animal, a donkey that was dragging two sticks on the back where they had all the equipment. And basically, this road over here was the only trail leading up there. It's a very ancient trail, and it went around and around and around, and it came over here. And then, of course, they would go up the mountain, and that's how they would get to the wheel. Currently, they would take this yellow road, the Americans, which this road over here was built in the 60s. But up until the 60s, this was the road that Forrest would have had to take if he went to the wheel with his family. But before that road existed, this was an ancient trail, like I said. And what would happen is the Indians would come from their relative reservations. And of course, the Crow Indians' reservations up here, they would come down here, down kind of where Level is, and they would cross the river here. There's currently a bridge there, but they would ford the river here. They would come down and they would basically follow this trail up. Okay. So that's all described here in the documentation. It doesn't require any research to figure out that that is an ancient trail. So anyway, I drew these two lines here based on the clues in the poem. Then when he's talking about tarry scant and marvel gaze, he's talking about when you leave, this is a place where you would tarry scant and marvel gaze. It's the overlook. And basically he's telling you, in my opinion, about intersecting lines. So let's look at that. And again, I'm not going to get too accurate here. I really did in the solve. But if we draw a line from there and we go up to the wheel, okay, you'll notice that if I position it properly, from where you would sit in the wheel, okay, from where you would sit in the wheel across the center of the wheel, and then it would cross Sirius, okay. Like I said, this is not totally accurate, but what I'm getting to is you would end up with something similar to this, where you have no paddle up your creek. Oops. All right. You have no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads and water high. All three of those are intersecting right here. And that was one of the primary places that I thought it was. If you look at this, is a pretty high tree. This tree's been there for years. So I'm thinking to myself, well, and this, of course, kind of goes downhill. Most people don't go over here. But the other thing to notice is that that line actually connects up with a smaller wheel down here. Okay. So my partner actually did go here, and we got pictures under here. And while I'm up here talking, there's also over here a place that you can look, and then there's a place over here, and of course there's another wheel over here. And I don't know how many people know about it, but right where the shadow is, I wouldn't go down here because it's pretty close to the edge of the cliff. But there's an ice cave entrance here. It's a huge cave. It actually goes all up under this area. Okay. And it's frozen all year long because of the fact that sun never hits that side of the mountain. And Forrest didn't want us going in the caves. I mentioned that though to Forrest in the email. I said, "Don't worry about it. My partner's not going to go in the cave because I'm sure there's a lot of caves up there." So anyway, that's what I wanted to point out to Dev JB. I don't want to get into a long thing here, but the other thing that I would mention, of course, is Five Springs, and you can look on my other videos about that and how I determined that we're following that spring down to the falls, and that's where I thought the chest was. Dev JB, I think, was looking up at somewhere around this area where the vegetation ends. And I can see that too, again, especially since you have an overlook looking right down in that area, which matches up with this. Okay. And what would happen too, by the way, this is for Candy or Chasing Indy. This ancient trail that the Indians took, all up in here, okay, there are nooks carved in the sides of the canyon walls. Those were actually used as beds for sweat lodges. All right. They would go in there and lay down. That was one of the things you could see in my other videos where the nooks are carved in the walls. So this is down to like 7,000 feet. So the Indian that was coming up, the brave that was coming up to go on his vision quest, would stop somewhere in here or maybe in the basin to do the sweat lodge part before they went up top. And if you look over here, you'll see a bunch of now, I'm not going to be able to find them, right? Oh, here they are. See all these TP rings all over the place? Those have been there for hundreds of years. There's some newer ones here, but there's tons of them up here. And basically, that is where the tribal elders would go, and also where they go before they prepare for sun dances and stuff that are going to occur at the wheel. All right. So basically, I think that's it. That's all I wanted to get through to Dev JB. I wanted to show him that that is how I connected up these vectors that I sent to Forrest. This is, like I said, you can imagine if I split this in half. This side is no place for a meet because you got Orion fighting towards the bull, okay, while his hunting dogs are chasing something, a rabbit, basically down the river, which is the Celestial Sea. And it takes you over towards Falmouth, which is the southern fish that sits below the water bearer, Aquarius, and Pisces, and all of that. This whole side of the sky is water themed. It's called the Celestial River. And again, all this stuff is documented. So this was, for example, Warm Waters Halt or uh, Sam Smith. And there is no water anywhere near here because the water's in the sky. But when you look quickly down from all of these clue locations, which are up in the clouds, so imagine warm waters halting in the clouds. That's what happens. That's how clouds are formed. Water vapor rises in the air, and then it halts as it cools down, forms the clouds, and then it comes back down again as rain. So if we look quickly down from the stars that are represented in the sky, it takes you down to a physical location. So as K Pro would ask, okay, so how do you get from the stars to the treasure chest? That's how. And Forrest knew that these clues were going to be here for a very long time. And although things may slightly change, the history is going to remain. So he can get you at least to the general area. He can get you more specific when you use these lines to construct a virtual blaze. When you go beneath this, when your boots on the ground, there's of course a physical blaze on the ground, but it's leading you. Because Forrest said there are billions of blazes. So out of the billions of blazes, we want the blaze. So the blaze would be the one that we found or established. See what I'm saying? So that was basically how our solve worked. That's basically what I told Forrest. And I also mentioned a couple of other spots in that email. One of them is down here by Crystal Creek. There's another one over here. And then I also mentioned Five Springs. But Five Springs we were going to hit later in the summer. I thought it was quicker to go and check this one. I knew there was no snow here, with one exception. Right over here, there's a drift. And the snow stays there till probably July. So you have to walk through snow to get to the wheel. But this whole area up here is perfectly clear. Down here, there was actually snow because of the fact that the sun ain't hitting it that much until probably early June, I want to say. So he was. If somebody was going to go here in June 6th, they could make it. By the end of the May, they can make it too. There might be a little bit of snow on the ground, but the water's no longer frozen and the creek is flowing. So that's it. Check out my other videos. Hit subscribe and hit that like button if you like this. And let me know what you think in the comments, especially Dev JB, who I'm essentially directing this video at. And I want everybody to have a good day. Peace.